So welcome. My name is Eleanor Rose, and this is my friend Kristy Pure Rebel.
Hello.
And Kristy is an amazing, amazing model, and is doing a lot of work to educate and help fellow models. So I'm really, really so excited to get to talk to you today, Kristy. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with some of just the basics. Can you tell us sort of how you got into freelance nude modeling in the first place?
Yes. Well, 12 years ago, before I had Facebook, I had MySpace. And I was 18 years old, and leading up until that time, I had family members and friends who were like, you should model when you get old enough. And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'm only 5'2", so that's probably not going to work out. But when I was 18, some photographer on MySpace contacted me and asked me if I wanted to do a photo shoot because he saw my, they didn't call them selfies back then because that's a dated term. He saw my sexy selfies on my MySpace. So he was like, you want to do a real shoot? And I was like, yeah. And so that was my first one, and I enjoyed it. And so we won't get into that story. I enjoyed the idea of being in front of the camera. What happened during that shoot is a whole nother story. We can get into that later. And then so after that, I still wanted to model, and because like I saw that there was people out there doing it that weren't necessarily like agency standard. And so I found some gigs on Craigslist, and through word of mouth and stuff. And at the beginning it was like I was just doing it for fun, and I was just kind of like once or twice a month for the first year or whatever. I was just doing random fun shoots. With the nude part, like I was okay with posing nude. I enjoyed like expressing my sexiness because I came from a place where like that was shunned. Like I grew up in a really Christian background. So like I was shunned a lot from like dressing hot, and I wanted to express that. So when I started, it was just purely out of rebellion and passion for being pretty and wanting to, show the world. And so that's how it started. And I was just doing it for fun. And eventually people started asking me more and more about nude modeling and if they could hire me for that. And I was like, well, I mean, this isn't my job, and I don't know if I should be or if I can. I was like, well, I mean, I had some weird experiences in the beginning, but the few in the beginning that were positive, I kept as a reference. And I was like, okay, well, if I can shoot with somebody first, non-nude, and then decide whether or not I'll be comfortable posing nude for them if they want to, then that's how I started. Because I didn't really have anybody to I had no idea about checking for references. I had nobody that was doing this in my life. So I was really shooting in the dark. So that's how I got started.
Just figuring it all out yourself.
Yeah.
Wow. I think you're the first model I've heard who got started on MySpace.
Whoa. Yeah, that was a thing.
I love that.
I'll be 30 in July.
Well, I don't think that's too unusual. We've got a lot of really amazing models who are in that age range, but it's been a couple of years since I think I've even heard anybody say the term MySpace. So it's neat to know that. So was Model Mayhem around then?
It was around, but I wasn't aware of it until like sometime into when I was 19. And I signed up for Model Mayhem in 2008. So I was probably almost 20. So for the first year and a half or so of my modeling, I didn't do any Model Mayheming.
Oh, okay. And you started getting paid work even before then?
Yeah. The first photographer on MySpace that hired me paid me $50. And then the next photographer who I worked with who hired me was probably like a month and a half later. He hired me for a fashion in the park shoot. So we were doing stuff in the park, and he paid me $50. And then after the shoot, he was super nice. He showed me his printed portfolio of tasteful glamour nudes. And he was like, if you ever want to do something like this, I'll pay you more, and it'll be in a safe environment. And I was like, I don't know. because that first photographer was kind of weird.
Right.
And so I wasn't sure about posing nude again quite yet. But then 3 months later, I contacted him back, probably because I needed the money, and partially because I was like, I want to be hot, whatever. So then I contacted him. I was like, all right, let's do that shoot. And I worked with that photographer almost every month for almost 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Now I'm curious, how long were those shoots you got paid $50 for?
The first one from MySpace, gosh, I mean, we didn't have like an hourly time set. He just said 50 for the shoot, and I want to say I was there for maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Oh wow, okay. See, when I started out and I got like the $50 for a shoot, it was like 4 or 6 hours long. So I was wondering if you experienced that.
And I think that the guy that did Fashion in the Park with me, that the second photographer who hired me, who asked me to do nudes later, I think that shoot, I think I was about 2 hours. We did 4 outfits in 2 hours, I think.
Awesome. So how long did it take for you to turn freelance modeling into your job, your career?
That's a really good question. About 6 years.
Wow.
And it was because I wasn't trying to make it my full-time career. Like I was, for the first several years that I was doing any modeling, including nude modeling, it was just because I enjoyed it and I wanted to do it. And I enjoyed the creation process, and I would come up with like ideas, and I wanted to like create these like pictures, and I wanted to be sexy. And that was basically it in the beginning. And I had absolutely like the first like year and a half, I had no idea that I was going to make it into a career. Because when I thought modeling, I didn't really even think of nude modeling as like a potential career, because I had never heard of that before. I was just like, oh yeah, these guys are like hiring me to get nude and whatever. And people were like, where are the pictures going? And I'm like, I send them to my boyfriend. After I was 19, after about a year and a half, almost 2 years of doing this modeling stuff, I was like, all right, I thought to myself, like, I've been doing this for a while, and like maybe I should get more serious, because I have all these photos, and like I thought they were just totally awesome. And I was like really into that show, America's Next Top Model, and because it was more popular back then. So I saw on America's Next Top Model that like the models have printed portfolios and they go to go-sees. And I was like, well, I have to do that. I have to do that in Seattle. So I had my printed portfolio, and I went on Craigslist, and I was looking for go-sees or like casting calls or like whatever to go to. And so I would go to these like casting locations, and like, I'd say, I want to be a petite fashion runway model. And they were like, most of the people said, okay, great. Well, we can sign you up. Your look is really hot in Japan right now, or something like that. Like they're trying to like get me to sign up and like pay a bunch of money. They're like, we can start you a portfolio. And I was like, I have a portfolio. I had an 80-page printed portfolio with like a bunch of 8.5 by 11 color photos in like a nice folder that I was bringing around. But it was all like pictures of like me in lingerie or like in bikinis or like body painted or whatever.
Right.
So to me, like that was my portfolio. That was my modeling. Like I had some headshots, and stuff like that, but it wasn't like, your standard like agency like portfolio. But to me, that was my portfolio. And they're like, oh, well, we have to take our pictures of you and charge you like $1,000, but you'll get it back after your first gig. And I actually did sign up for one of those and pay them like $500 almost, and they never got me any gigs. So.
Yeah, that's sort of an age-old scam.
Yeah. Oh, but so I had this thought in my mind, like if I'm going to be a model and be more serious about it, then I have to be a petite fashion runway model, because in my head, that's what it was. That was full-time modeling. You had to do runway and be in catalogs and billboards and stuff. So I was doing all these castings, and the one that finally like helped me figure it out, there was a really nice guy at the John Robert Powers casting call. They in Seattle, they do it on the 7th floor in the Macy's, where I think back then it was still called the Bon Marché. But they do it on the 7th floor in downtown Seattle in the mall. And they had a ton of chicks come in and apply to be a professional model.
Mm-hmm.
I was there with my printed portfolio and everything, you know, same old song. And this guy that was doing the castings and like doing the pre-interviews before you like, you know, practice your walk down the fake catwalk or whatever. He was like, so why do you want to be a model? And like, you know, what are your aspirations? And I told him like, I want to be a petite fashion runway model. And he was like, look, like, I don't know how long you've been trying to do this, but like, I need to set it to you straight right now. And I was like, deer in the headlights. Like, what are you talking about? He said, there are possibly 30 mainstream agency positions in the United States for petite professional fashion runway models. And I was like, okay, there's 30 spots maybe, so there's a chance, right? And he's like, all right, but you really, really got to know somebody, and the competition is fierce, you know, and even if you have all the connections, it's still like extremely unlikely that you're going to get one of those options. So, you know, you can get into acting because of your height, but you probably can't be a full-time runway petite fashion model. And I was like, okay. Well, I was really, really, really glad that guy had that conversation with me because I remembered it this whole time. And, you know, I didn't really want to be a fashion model. I thought I wanted to be a fashion model, but all the stuff that I was modeling, like the shoots that I came up with on my own accord, they were all in like, you know, strappy black things or like with crazy lighting or just something weird, you know. I never like sought out like, you know, oh, I want to shoot in this nice jacket, you know, like, so that wasn't really my thing. And it took me a long time to figure out what my niche was.
Right. Yeah. So how'd that actually end up happening then?
Finding my niche? Well, with finding my niche, I had to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to be a fashion model. And so that process that I just described helped me get there. But starting at the age of 16, I worked in the food service industry. I was a fast food worker. And then I got a job at California Pizza Kitchen when I was 19. So I had a job. Like I didn't need the money. I wasn't like trying to get paid work initially. But paid work was coming at me. After a few years, paid work was coming at me more frequently. And so I noticed that a majority of the paid work that was knocking on my door was photographers who wanted to shoot like implied nude or like artistic nude or glamour nude. And I was like, all right, so like I can do these sexy shoots for money, you know, or the, you know, more revealing ones showing more skin. And I was like, all right, so that's my niche. But in the beginning, when I was like 18, 19, 20, if you go to my fan page and scroll back all the way to the beginning, a lot of my photos are kind of like punk rock gothic chick, you know, like me holding a gun and it's like, you know, with red lighting or like me in some like black strappy outfit with like lots of really dark makeup. And that was like my thing. Because when I was in high school, I was a gothic outcast, really weird, nerdy chick that was into cats, like so much that people made fun of me. And so I was like anti anything that resembled the Disney Channel with like bright colors or pink or like, you know, cutesy bra and panty stuff. I was like, so I had this fan page that I started when I was 19, 20, and I put all my like punk rocker, rock and roll theme photos up, and people were responding to them, and some people were like, you know, you should try, you know, doing something in a pink bikini or whatever. And I was like, whatever, like I'm not doing that. But I ended up like getting booked for like those kinds of shoots, and so I was like, okay, fine, I'll buy some pink bras or whatever. And then the more people that saw those photos being posted, they were like, oh, I really like this look, bring this outfit. And then it became like, okay, I have to have all these outfits that are like really cutesy, glamoury, because this is a lot of the paid work that is coming at me. So I went through this phase after a while where I was like, oh, I'm only going to accept paid work. And like, these are the outfits that I have that photographers want to pay me in. So my own niche and genre within nude modeling became obscured after about 4 or 5 years, because I was all like suddenly hot shit in my mind. And I was like, well, people are paying me left and right, and like these are my outfits, so like I'm not going to accept any trade work. After about 4 or 5 years, I was like, I've been doing this for so long, like I'm not going to accept any trade work, and I became depressed.
Right.
Not depressed like full on, but I mean like I was losing my passion for modeling because I was just always doing these shoots that didn't like align with like what I was inspired by. I was always doing these like stick your butt out shoots, you know.
Right. Right.
And so it wasn't until I was 24 that I had more of an idea of like what I was going to do with my future of modeling, because I had just been fired from the restaurant that I worked at. So at 24, like I had a lot of life shit going on, but in a nutshell, like I needed to change my lifestyle because I was partying too hard and not taking anything seriously. So I got sober, and I had a new boyfriend, and I did not have my restaurant job anymore, and I was like moving out of my party house that I lived at, and I was like, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to get some other like bartending job or whatever? And it became apparent, like one of my best friends told me, why don't you just book more photo shoots instead of trying to get another bartending job somewhere? Because like I didn't really want to anyway. So he was like, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll give that a try. And that's the point. That was like the changing point in my modeling career, where I stopped just thinking about it as a fun hobby, where I was like just, trying to, present an image or express myself or just doing it for fun, but like, for some of my money or some of my income. And I was like, I can do this like full time if I really tried, because like I had heard of some other names of other models that do it. And I was like, it's possible. Like if they can do it, I can do it. But like, what are these other models doing who are full time? What are they doing that I'm not doing? And I had just had my Model Mayhem portfolio up, and then like by this time I had Facebook and stuff. So I had a Facebook fan page and a Model Mayhem page, and I was like, work's not coming at me. How am I going to do this full time? So I was poking around, asking other models and like looking at their page, and I saw that they also had their own websites. They had Tumblr pages, because Tumblr was like really hot like 5 years ago, and I still use Tumblr, but like not as much. So like blogging and like putting yourself out there and like making little flyers for your travel notices, like that's stuff that I started to do because I started following other models. And then I began traveling, and that's when I became full time. So I was just kind of like willy-nilly in it, thinking, oh, if I'm pretty, somebody's gonna want to book me, and like it didn't really work out that way. Like I had no concept of marketing yet,
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm finding it really fascinating that you actually got the experience of growing and learning the business while it wasn't what you were relying on for income. And then from there, when you did end up needing to figure out a transition into something new, you had that available. And I love that you said you looked at what the models who were successful were doing that you didn't do, because I think that's so crucial, and a lot of new models miss that step. And it sounds like you did something quite similar to what I did when I decided to really take it seriously and really analyzed it. You didn't just look at it surface level. It sounds like you really put a lot of time and thought into figuring out what they did and how you could put your spin on that.
Yeah. And I do have kind of like a turning point like moment where like I suddenly started getting more people like interested in working with me. And I don't know if this applies to like all models now, because this is like almost 6 years ago, I think. I had my Tumblr like I had started it like a little bit before I went full time, but I didn't really like add very much to it. It was really half-assed. It was just like I would post a photo and that was it. So I posted a photo along with a long blog post saying like, you know, I just got fired from my job and, you know, I don't know what to do with my life and I'm going to try and be like, you know, more serious about my modeling. And I put a lot of thought and emotion. And when I was going to hit send, I was like, should I really like post this publicly online? Because it's really personal. But I was like in a rough spot. Like I had just had my second DUI. I'd dumped my boyfriend. I was moving out of my friend's house and like all this shit was happening at the same time. So I posted about it. And then a photographer who lived in my city contacted me and he said, you know, I've seen your pictures and I knew that you were a model in my area, but I never really thought to work with you because you just seemed like you were a flat image to me. And now I can see your personality and, you know, I would like to hire you for a shoot. And I was like, oh, so if people think that you're like a person with a personality, they're more likely to want to shoot with you. And I was like,
Right.
so that's when I started learning that I took that with a grain of salt and I was like, all right, so from now on, I have to occasionally post something that's personal on my social media or whatever, like Facebook, Instagram, whatever. And people respond to it. And so that's part of my marketing now. Like my personality is part of my marketing as a freelance model.
Yeah. That's so cool to hear you say that because I think that really is so crucial. And so key because that's, you know, there's so many models. You have to stand out. And so often the best way you can stand out is just to be yourself and let your personality shine through. And that can be scary sometimes because not everybody is everybody's cup of tea. But I think long term, bringing your personality into your marketing and a part of your online presence really is so valuable for our careers. So that's really neat that you saw that so tangibly.
Yeah, well, that one photographer told me point blank.
Right.
So it was a sign for me because I was trying to find out how to get more work suddenly. Like I was suddenly trying to get more work and I was like, all right, I got to figure this out. And so that was a big sign. I know that there's a lot of other like professional traveling models like in my genre that like don't post personal stuff though. Or it's like really rare that they will but they're still successful, but they have other like marketing going their way. So I mean it works for me, but like I'm sure that like everybody's got their own angles that they just gotta find, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you said earlier that you when you decided to do this as a career, you really looked at what other models were doing and what worked for them. And I'm curious, at what point did you start getting involved in the wider freelance model community and starting to actually talk to those people? And how did that play out in your career? Did that help you at all?
Yeah. So there were a few things because I was like really not like into Facebook for a while. So it's so easy now for people to just like find somebody that they want to be and just message them, you know. I wish I had that back then, but I was just like shooting in the dark. I was kind of like anti-technology for a while. So Facebook was around, but I was like, you know, trying to be rebellious or whatever. So anyway, the first few times that I like saw other models that were doing it full time, I was at like a group photo event in Seattle. There was one in North Seattle where there was like some like avant-garde fashion company that had a casting call up for like, you know, come get photographed in our clothing. And one of the girls that was there was Justine Marie, and she was doing makeup. And one of the photographers said, oh yeah, she also models, but she's here doing makeup today. And so I was like talking to her a little bit, and she's like, yeah, I just do this full time. And I'm like, what? You do this full time? Like, what? Like, and she had tattoos, and I was like, well, if she does it full time, you know, and isn't like agency or whatever, you know, like that put a seed in my brain. And then I was at a different like group photo event that I found on Craigslist or something like some other time, and Sierra McKenzie was there, and I was watching her pose, and like I was next after her, and she was just like nailing it. And I was like, wow, she's like jumping and like, and you know, it was all fashion. Like she was like in a dress or whatever, and I was like, she's really good. And after I saw her posing around, I heard her name around a little bit, and I asked her like, so is this what you do full time? And she was like, yeah, it is what I do full time. And I'm like, really? Like, how do you find work? And she mentioned her Tumblr got her a lot of work. And I was like, well, I have Tumblr, but I haven't really like got work there. And she's like, oh yeah, you just gotta post regularly. And so I was like, so the first few like hints that I got were like in person from people, like, and then after that I was like on Model Mayhem, like looking for girls on Model Mayhem who looked really professional, like who had really awesome portfolios. And I was just direct messaging random people and asking like, hey, like, what do you do to like make this your full-time gig? Like, how do you find like all this work? Like, do you do this full time? Like, can you give me any pointers? And a lot of them didn't reply. You know, I wasn't part of a network at that point, but a few of them were just like, you know, you have to have a really good portfolio first. And I'm like, well, I thought I had a really good portfolio, but it didn't have like any like congruency to it, you know, like I had just had a bunch of random shoots, and there wasn't anything where I like focused just on quality, because it's like you have to have like a lot of quality in your portfolio. You can't just be like, okay, I got these pictures from this shoot last week and I'm going to put them up on my portfolio, and then tomorrow I'm going to use some of those. It's like, no, you got to choose the cream of the crop, make the best images that display like everything that you are as a model and your best posing and, you know, your best makeup and looks, and then more people will want to hire you. And at that point I was like in my head I always have this like concept where like I know about my appearance, and I'm like, I'm really confident in my appearance and in my ability to emote, and I just thought that would automatically be obvious to everybody. But it's like, no, you actually have to collaborate with extremely talented people to bring that message out there so that the paid work can come to you.
Yeah. Wow. And so you started to realize that after a model told you that you needed a quality portfolio then?
Yeah, she told me, I don't even remember who that was. That was just like somebody on Model Mayhem. She said, you have to have a really strong portfolio, and you can't just run around asking for paid work. You have to do some trade work. And this is around the time, like up to about 5 years into me modeling. I was like 24 almost. And at that point I was like, well, I only do paid work, you know? So because I was only doing paid work, I was only working with people who like were trying to work on their portfolios, or who just wanted to see a naked girl and they didn't really care so much about like the lighting because they'll fix it in post or whatever, you know what I mean? So I was only working with people who were paying me, and I wasn't really like focusing on like, you know, collaborating with, you know, high-end like people. Right.
Yeah, this is such a neat story, and there's so many things I want to ask you questions about, but in the interest of time, I do want to sort of reorient a little bit.
Okay.
Because you run these really amazing workshops, and you know, I know you run the Freelance Modeling 101 because I flew to Seattle to present one of those with you, which was such a neat experience.
Yeah.
And so I'd really love to hear just a little bit more about how you got into providing this education for models and what that means to you.
Okay. Well, yes, this kind of brings it around full circle. Because I was so like desperate at that time that I got fired and I was asking around for help. I knew that like other people who are out there were eventually going to, you know, need this information as well, just like me. And up until that point, like the way that I found most photographers outside of like, you know, the internet was being invited to group photo events. And so the first group photo event that I attended was when I was 19, and there were 40 photographers and 40 models, and it was called the Black Mist Bikini Bash. And Black Mist was an organization in Seattle for several years, and they had 3 events a year. And so after I went to the Bikini Bash, I got lots of photos, and I had more stuff to put in my portfolio, and I had contacts, people who met me that wanted to shoot with me more in the future. And so it kind of was like just a great place to network and like help me get further. And so I went to all the Black Mist events for a few years. They had a Snow Bunny one, and they had a haunted shoot. So the Snow Bunny bash was always in a cabin, like in the middle of the winter. And the haunted shoot was like Halloween theme. And that was always my favorite one because I was like into that stuff. So I went to like all of them for like a few years in a row. And then the owner, Contessa Black, that's her heart, moved to the East Coast. And so there was no more Black Mist group events for me to like go and like get lots more photos and like see what other photographers were like, you know, interested in working with me in the future and stuff. Because they were all non-nude events, but they were great places to like find people who might want to hire you in the future. And after she moved away, that ended. So because I went to a lot of them for years in a row, people were starting to ask me like, do you know when the next one is? And I'm like, no, she's gone. I don't know. Like, and people were like passing around like, well, somebody should start a group shoot, you know? And so I was just like, well, I want to do these group shoots. So I'm just going to try and figure out like, you know, how to do it myself. And I did start with a business partner, and he didn't work out. Like, he just took all the money and didn't do any of the work. We don't have to drop names on here, but he's not in the industry anymore, so whatever. I hope he's not watching this. Anyway, I started a meetup.com account as a meetup organizer because that's how Black Mist ran their groups. And I put together a bikini event, and then I put together other events. And so that was the first like type of event that I put together. It was like group shoots with like 10 or 15 models and 10 or 15 photographers. And I often have makeup artists that I pay to come to the events. And I do that because when I started, that was the way that I kind of got my foot in the door to like move on. It's like a great launch pad to make connections and like meet other people who are doing modeling and photography in the freelance world too. And so the group shoots for newer models are the backbone of like the events that I coordinate. Like those are the ones that I do the most frequently. I do workshops too now, where I have like a PowerPoint presentation where I talk about posing and where I talk about like how to book shoots and how to check references and like not end up in a scary situation and stuff. Because that's like the nitty gritty details that I wish somebody told me when I started. But it's really hard with girls who are just getting into modeling for them to absorb that information, because a lot of them are doing it for different reasons. And so I do those workshops sparingly because it's hard to get people to show up because everybody has their self-doubts about why am I doing this? You know, I signed up for it, but like, screw this. Like, I'm just going to, you know, work at my coffee stand job or whatever. So those ones, they're really valuable and they have lots of great information, and I always make them like super cheap, but I don't do them that frequently because I find it more valuable to do one-on-one consultations with models, because different models that come to the seminars that I host have different motivations and different comfort zones and, you know, different goals and stuff. And it's easier to like tackle and like help them get to the point where, you know, they're accomplishing what they want. It's easier to do that with a one-on-one conversation than it is with a group setting. But I do enjoy the groups as well, because sometimes models get freaked out at one-on-one events and instead they more like to go to a group. So the reason I do it is because I wish that somebody was providing that service when I started that I could find. And now that there's Facebook, it's easy to like find other people who are like providing those services or giving that information that you could just like, you know, contact and say, hey, like, you know, I would like to learn from you. And so I wish that platform was available like back when I started.
Absolutely. And I just want to throw a quick plug in here. Any models who are watching this, if you ever find yourself in Seattle at the time that Kristy is hosting one of those group workshops, They're amazing. The information she shares is absolutely fantastic, and you should absolutely go if you get the chance.
Yes, follow my group Facebook page. It's called Femme Photo Ltd. Femme like femme fatale, photo Ltd.
Perfect. I will make sure to get that link from you so that I
Okay.
can put it under the video when it airs. So I think, I don't actually know what time it is, but I think we're probably at a point where we need to wrap up. So in closing, what was that?
It's a quarter till.
Okay. Yeah, in closing, I want to ask you, if you had to pick one thing that you wish a more experienced model had told you at some point earlier in your career, what would that be that you would want to share with the people watching right now?
That's a really good one, and it's always the first information that I give to a new model. The one thing that I screwed up the worst, that I wish I could go back in time and like figure out earlier, was my name. That sounds really easy, but like when I first started modeling, I was just going by my real name. And because like there wasn't Facebook back then, there wasn't like, you know, it wasn't like if somebody types your name on the internet that your freaking grandma is going to get a notification right away. Like now, you know, like if somebody tags you in a photo on your personal Facebook, everybody's going to know.
Right.
So, and I learned that the hard way. So, and you know, I could go into the details, but anyway, like basically I had these fetish images that came out on Facebook, and my dad got the notification, and he was like a Bible thumper Christian back then, and he thought that I was like doing God knows what, because the images, they weren't nude, but they were like very suggestive, like latex and chains and stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, if I had started with a model alias that sounded like a real person's name from the beginning and branded myself as that, then my life would be a lot easier. But I ended up with a nickname Rebel because I was on this promo dance team that named me Rebel. And when I was signing up for Model Mayhem, I was like, I'll have to come up with a name. So I'll just name myself Rebel. And Rebel was already taken, so I had to come up with an adjective to go before that. So then I ended up with Pure Rebel. And so that's my modeling name. But when I'm like submitting to a magazine or something like that, there's a lot of publications, or like when you're signing up for Facebook, you know, and you want to put like your model alias as your real name instead of your real name, it's like Facebook's going to know that it's a fake name and you're going to get flagged, or like the magazine's going to know that it's a fake name and they're going to be like, come on, what's your real name? So I wish that I came up with like Susie May or something that was, you know, not Susie May, but like something that sounded like a real person's name.
That sounds so Southern.
Right. But anyway, like I wish that I had started that from the beginning. But I mean, even now, like I think about it, and I can't just go back and change it because I've been modeling for almost 12 years.
Yeah, once you've got that branding, it's so hard to change.
Yeah, I'm not gonna change my name. But I use that as an example when I'm advising other models, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So make a name, make an email address that is that name, and then make your Facebook page for that name, and then social media for that name. Like, just try to look professional from the start.
And one more piece of info I'm going to throw in with that. Before you use that name, Google that name.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure it's not already taken.
Or like
actually, there's a new model that I found on Facebook who in the last year or two popped up. She decided to start using the name Eleanor Rose. And she hasn't gained much traction, but it always confuses me when I see her, when I Google myself, because I'm like, okay. But even my name, if I Googled it, I might have chosen something else because I went by Eleanor R at first, and I kept getting asked Roosevelt or Rigby. And then Eleanor Rose is also a clothing brand, so I'm nearly impossible to Google. So I really like to advise models that they Google the name before choosing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's so neat. I've been wondering for a while how you chose Pure Rebel, so that's really cool to finally hear.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Some people think it's a political innuendo, but it's not. So anybody out there watching this, it's not political at all.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, awesome. That's a really great piece of advice to end on. And thank you so much for joining us today. I know you already gave us your Facebook page. Is there anywhere else that people can find you that you'd like to share?
Oh yeah, my Instagram is my biggest following. It's pure_rebel.
Okay.
And you can find me there and follow me on Model Mayhem. I'm Pure Rebel there. Yeah, hit me up.
Awesome.
purerebelmodel@gmail.com. My email
Cool.
address.
Yeah, I will include some of your links below the video, like I already said. So if any of you want to find her as a model or go follow her Facebook page for resources, that information will be available. Well, Kristy, thank you so much. You do so much for the modeling community, and I'm really thrilled that I got to have you on this summit and talk to you today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Thanks, Eleanor, and goodbye, everybody, I guess.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.